You're listening to the More Movement Crew podcast, Season 3, Purpose Stories. Sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee or tea, and enjoy. Welcome to the More Movement Crew podcast. I'm your host, Kanina Porter, and we have another episode of Purpose Stories. This particular episode is bittersweet. One of my kids, I consider my kids, recently passed away, and today this podcast is dedicated to Kimberly Faulkner. I'm going to share what I learned from Kimberly and what our relationship was like and what we all should be able to take away from her life, because we can learn something from her. And through her story, I fully now understand the power of God and the importance of us understanding how powerful the mind is. And so Kimberly's story is a perfect testament of what God can do. And so she lived, she loved, and there was so much that I gained from just being with her and having the type of relationship that we had. So I'll just start by saying that, Kimberly was More Movement Crew fan. She was always cheering me on. She read my book twice, and she's just like, "I love your book, Miss K." She called me Miss K, and she was just the biggest fan. And she kept on asking me, "Can I be on your podcast? Can I be a guest on your podcast?" And I kept saying, "All right, Kim, I'm going to let you on my podcast. I'm going to let you on. Just give me some time." And I just felt like it wasn't time for me to put her on the podcast because she was still working through some things, and I just really wanted her to be able to share her story. And now that I think about it, I kind of wish that I would have let her share her own story. And so this episode is just me doing the best I can to express, from my perspective, her story and putting it out there so that it blesses people, because that's ultimately what Kim wanted to do, is she really wanted to bless people. And so I'll just start by sharing the story of how I met Kim. So I worked for a nonprofit organization that worked with young people, and Kimberly was one of the students that came in for that particular class that year. And so, she was a part of my, I guess you could say, caseload. I was her case manager. And, she was a part of the class. She was a part of the students. She was, there faithfully, on time, every day. She just was always, kind of up to something, always doing something, and we would, constantly have to be on her about things. But she was consistent. That's one thing about Kimberly. She was consistent. And the particular day that I can remember when our relationship changed, when she went from being just a student to her and I working really closely together, is one day she was in her construction class and she had just an outburst. She just went off and she was, yelling. And so I was called to come downstairs to diffuse the situation. And so I come downstairs and the instructor is like, "You better do something with her. You better do something with her." And so I, try to get her to calm down. And I just remember that she kept saying, "It triggered me. It triggered me." Something that was said triggered her. And so we sat down. I finally got her to sit down and calm down. And I told her, I said, when you feel like something is triggering you, there are other things you can do besides respond this way. And I said, you can ask to be excused, and not make a big deal about it. I said, you can do some breathing exercises and calm yourself down, or you could ask to talk to somebody. And so she was sitting there and she was listening. And I don't remember all of the details because she talks really fast when she gets upset. So I don't remember all the details. I know that she was saying something about not having her family with her, or not having family in the city that she lived in, and something about some trauma that she experienced. And so um, I I just remember telling her, and really this was just a response just to get her to calm down and to just ease her mind. I said, okay, then I'm going to be your mom. And I said that, and I really don't know where it came from. Well, I guess God, told me to say that, but I just said, okay, when you're at Youth Build, I'm going to be your mom. And when I said that, she just kind of calmed down and she was like, okay, okay, that's great. That's cool. I'm good now. And I said, but if I'm going to be your mom, when I get on you and when I tell you to do something, you do it. And when I correct you, then you need to do what I tell you to do, right? Because if I'm correcting you, it's in love, but I need you to do what I tell you to do. And I'm not going to let up on you, right? Because if I'm your mom, that's what I'm going to do while you're here. And she said, okay, okay. So she got it together and she went back to class. And so from that moment on, when I told her that, I could absolutely not get rid of this girl. She would call me. She'd come see me. She'd come visit me. She would keep me posted on everything. Everybody was just like, come get your kid. Come get your kid. And so, and we had that relationship where I was like a mom. And yes, she didn't always listen to me, and she got in trouble with things and did things, that got her in trouble. But she always would come back to me, and she would always talk to me about what was going on. I remember we had this particular moment that I wrote about in my book where I was working on a Saturday, trying to catch up on something, and I was in the office. And Kimberly called me and she wanted to come by to pick up something. So she came by to pick up something, and I was really, really focused on my work. So I'm staring straight into the laptop, and she's talking, and I'm like, yeah, just, not really listening to her, and just letting her talk. And then she pulls up a chair and she sits down beside me. And I didn't even turn around. I just kind of kept working and kept, focusing on the spreadsheet or whatever it was I was doing. And I remember she stopped talking and she just laid her head on my shoulder. And in that moment, I stopped working. And I just let her rest it there. And I just put my hand on her head. And I just let her lay there, because in that moment, I realized that it really wasn't about me, listening necessarily. It was about me being there and her being able to do that, right, in that moment. That is what she needed. And so I just kind of sat there and let her rest her head on my shoulder. And, what was on the computer wasn't as important as that particular moment. And so, from that point on, God really gave me just a certain amount of patience to work with her. The road ahead of her was going to be a long one. After she completed the program, she went on and she eventually got an apartment, but she was homeless for, periods at a time. Her housing situation was not as stable as she wanted it to be, or as it could be. She did have opportunities. I can't say that she never had opportunities to maintain housing, but there was just always something. And the reason why there was always something is because she was battling with some mental health issues. And so she'd be doing okay, and then I would get a phone call saying, either by her saying that she is in another mental health institution for a little bit, and that she was working through what was going on, and then she would get out, and then she'd be okay, and then she'd be back. And so she had at some point put me down as her emergency contact. And so every time that she went into a facility, I was called and I would talk to her and we would talk through it. And I remember always telling her, because she was a believer. She was a Christian. And she believed in God. And I would tell her that, God is able to heal you. God is able to help you with any mental health issues that you have. But you got to allow him to come in and to help you. You got to get to that place where you allow him to do that for you. And she was like, I know, Miss K, I know. And so, it just felt like I was telling her that, but it just wasn't really getting through. It just wasn't really making an impact because she just kept on, having, these issues. And so then she finally got to a place where she was doing well. She was out of the hospital. She was taking medications, but she was heavily on medications. And so we had lunch one day, and I paid for her. I took her out to lunch, and she wanted Mexican. So we ate Mexican food, and I asked her to do a promo for my book and my podcast. And so she recorded the promo video in my car. And I remember she was struggling to breathe because she said that, the medication and all the stuff that she was on just made it difficult for her to breathe. And so she still wanted to do this commercial for me. And so she did it, and I used it. And she just kept telling me how much she just really enjoyed the book. And that was kind of the last lunch that we actually had. The rest of our conversations from that point on were just phone calls. And so she, went on to be in a relationship, and she finally found a relationship with a young man that she really, really enjoyed being with. She enjoyed his company. And for the first time, I could see that she was happy. I could see that she was stable, and that she, had a partner that just really loved her. And so, she was good for a while. She was going to church consistently and regularly, and she was just happy. And so I remember, towards the end of her life, she had sent me a message. It was on Facebook Messenger. And it was basically saying that, it was basically sharing that God had taken away some of those mental health issues, right? And had taken away, she said, the voices in her head. And she said, Miss K, all I know is I prayed and I told God that I was tired of hearing those voices, and I was ready to accept all that he had for me. And she said, and Miss K, they went away. And you could feel the excitement in the message as I was reading it. She was like, God is real. God is real. You can't tell me he's not real. God is real. And so I was floored when I saw the message, because I thought, okay, all those conversations that I had been having with her, she finally tapped into that place, and she was able to be healed of those voices. And so from that point on, I didn't get many phone calls from Kimberly about that issue. And she was going to church regularly, and she would call me and give me updates. And the last conversation that I had with Kimberly, she was really, really excited about karate. She was taking some karate classes, and she was so excited about it. And she said, when I get my first belt, Miss K, I'm going to invite you to my first match. And I was like, that's great, Kim. I probably was in the middle of doing something, but I took her calls. I always try to take her calls. And I was like, that's great. Call me. I'll be there to help you, to watch you when you get your first belt. And she was like, awesome. She's like, I'm so excited. She said, I didn't think I would be able to do it, but I'm doing good, and I'm trying to work on, losing weight. And she was so excited. She had so much joy. And in her, she had so much excitement about what was coming and what was ahead. And that was the last conversation that I had with her. So when I think about, my memories of her, the last conversations that I had with her were always good. And she was at the closest in her walk with God that she had ever been. And when I think about her passing away, that makes me happy. That gives me joy to know that in the end, she was able to see God heal her, right? And she was able to trust God in a way that she never had before. And so she was enjoying her life towards the end. She's young, right? And it's unfortunate that she's no longer with us, but she did leave here in a really, really good place. And so when I think about, our relationship, and I think about how I did sacrifice my time and, my energy to really be there for her and to be the support that she needed, I'm glad that I did that. I'm glad that I took the time and did that, because to be honest, there were days when I just really wasn't, I just really wasn't feeling it. I was busy, I was doing things, but I'm just grateful that I did take the time to invest in her. And I thank you that God was able to use me to help her to fight, those mental health issues that she had. And so what I learned from Kimberly is that there is always a reason to be grateful. There's always a reason to see people as people. And she did that. She saw people as people, and she never would understand, why people would hate other people. She didn't get it. There's a lot of things that she didn't get about hate. And so she just embraced people. She loved people for who they were. And that was special. I think that was powerful. And the one thing that I believe that we can all learn is that, I think each and every one of us has our own struggle with our thoughts, with our thinking, with mental health. And we know someone who has a mental health issue. And so I'm reminded of the power of God when I think about that. I'm reminded that He is able to take away the thoughts, the ideas, if you would just give it to Him, if you would just trust Him with that, if you would ask Him to help you. And so we are living in a time where mental health is people are at their weakest in their faith, in their faith in humanity. Hate is at an all-time high. Poverty, sickness, death, violence. And so we have to understand and recognize that God has the power to help us with our thinking, to heal our mind and our thoughts. And we don't recognize how important it is for us to give those things to God, to cast down those imaginations. When you get that thought in your mind, when you think that whatever it is going to swallow you and overtake you, just know that when you give it to God, He's going to help you through it. And so we have all struggled with it. We've struggled with depression. People struggle with anxiety. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, God is able. He's able. And Kim's words were a testament to that. And Kim's life was a testament to that. And in the end, she got to see that God was able. And so I hope that this podcast does some justice to Kimberly's life, that whoever is listening, you don't have to live a perfect life. We're not perfect. We're not supposed to be perfect. And I'm not perfect, and neither was Kimberly, right? But we serve a perfect God who is always able to bring us out of whatever it is that we're going through. And so I hope that you can take that away with you. If this has blessed you, this story has blessed you, share this podcast with someone. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this message, because we want to make sure that people are blessed by this story. And so this is our tribute to Kimberly. Rest in heaven. And thank you for listening. Until then, be blessed.